All right. Oh, there we go. I don't have to have my phone over here now. All right. What's up, everybody? We're going to record this little live and recording. Those that were looking for us on Twitter Spaces, Twitter likes to play with us. We have to have all these devices and cables, so we'll do a Twitter Spaces next time. But yeah, we're going to record a live episode here of the podcast of this week's in the news, and we have a good one. And we have no idea how long it'll last because that's kind of how we work. So. Hold on, let me grab where did I put my water? I know I had it in my hand. Hold on.
All right, you good.
All right. Let's do it. All right. Here, I'm gonna. Alrighty. All right, you ready, boss?
Well, let's go do it.
Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And of course, you are in the news, and it is myself, Fanzo. I'm joined, as always, by Jordache. Jordache, how's it going, my friend?
Man, another day, another dollar, another waiting for the trip to the moon still, man. How you doing?
I'm doing. I mean, we got ETH mooning ish. We got some feet pics mooning. But funny enough, the feet pics aren't what actually is making us, roll our eyes in the space. And
Right.
for those that we had so much great feedback from last episode, and we like doing this kind of in the news, kind of covering a lot of the hot topics that are out there right now. And we were talking a lot about brands, and we gave Starbucks a lot of love because, well, they're doing some great things. I did hear that they are going to be rolling out their beta at a little bit faster of a rate. So I know the amount of messages I got were like, Brian, did you actually say where to sign up? And I was like, it is still in beta. But I mean, I would say, when it comes to iconic kind of brand TV show, I mean, by far my top, I mean, it's top 5, could be top 3 TV show of mine of all time. Game of Thrones. They announced last fall. Like I remember it was like October, November. Warner Brothers announced that they were launching a digital collectible over on Nifty's, which we have the Matrix NFTs over there on Nifty's with Warner Brother. We actually included the Matrix in our Mint 365 collection, so I was a fan of that. I loved, they did a great job. They have the red pill, blue pill. They did a great job of storytelling, and I remember I was seeing like, man, Game of Thrones. I was like, that's their target demo is right now active in Web3. Like a bunch of us is geeky and nerdy and like sci-fi-ish and HBO and even I don't care what people say about the season finale, right? It created a lot of buzz. I'm a big fan of the new show as well. I watching all those episodes. But Jordache, what the hell happened? I mean, I was just waiting for the reveal to see what the art looked like. Not because I expected the art not to look good, but I expected if the ball was going to be dropped, there was going to be some things that were going to be dropped, right? Like anything from, because they're onboarding a lot of new people into this space, right? With a brand like that. And, I didn't know if it was going to be the price point, but my goodness, my feed was inundated with, just a not good representation of Game of Thrones. What was your take?
Man, to say I was disappointed is an understatement. Let's be honest, because just like what you said, like Game of Thrones is up there. Like it's up there with The Wire. It's up there with some good old shows, right? That's the top. That's like the top 5. It's Mount Rushmore of shows that have been created in our lifetime, I would say. And if you just think about what they were able to create with the show, we'll come back to the NFT here in a second, but like the graphics and the amount of art that went into the show, from the characters to the costumes to the CGI, all the crazy stuff that went in there. And then you're like, holy crap, they're coming out with an NFT. You got a brand like this. You got HBO backing it, right? You're like, we're about to come out here with some hot NFT art. Bro, like this stuff is horrible. Like it legitimately feels like there was some intern playing around with Microsoft Paint that sit there decided to draw some art, man. I mean, and all jokes aside, like I wouldn't like I would give him a pass from a technical standpoint if the Mint had some technical issues, right? There's always things that pop up when it comes to technical things. I can give you a pass for that, right? It's all about how do you recover from that? How do you communicate during that time? All that stuff, right? I've been in mints that have evolved from that. But the art, this is not something that like is all of a sudden appears the day of the mint. This is something that's been created over months. And I don't know, it's like I look at it from one of two ways. Either whoever's in charge of this is probably is very scared of their job right now, that says, holy crap, how did I let something like this get out the door? Or this is just such a side project that there was not anybody that actually, I'm not gonna say cared enough about, because they put some money and effort into this, but like this is something that like it's like the stepchild of something happening. But like you said, this is an iconic brand for HBO Max. So that's why I just don't understand. I'm confused. I guess is a better word I would use, is confused of how art like this could have came out from a show and a brand that has such a different representation from what they've been able to produce over those 8 seasons of that epic show.
Yeah, and and I know, like, I learned this the hard way with the Matrix, right? Because when I heard the Matrix coming out, I wanted Neo, I wanted Keanu Reeves, and then when I got into their Discord, and I've been active with that community, off and on, one of the hard things for Warner Brothers is, right, they don't have rights to the actor using the actors, actual, actors. So like, I'm sure Game of Thrones had that same piece, right? Like, how did you have the Mother of Dragons without it being the Mother of Dragons, right? Like, you have to be able to show it. But let's face it, they do that in video games. They do it with action figures. Like, this isn't like because someone was defending Game of Thrones over on Twitter, and it was, it was unfortunately an influencer that I think got their they bit off, I think, more than they could chew, because they were making all these like grandiose claims about Game of Thrones. But I mean, for those that hadn't seen it, right? I mean, not only is the art, like, the backgrounds are kind of blah, right? Like, I mean, very, kind of, I would say, flat. But the other part that they did, that, like the figure of whatever you got for reveal, like, there's no action pose, right? It's literally like everyone has their hands to their side. And then the part that just was like mind blowing was like, let's face it, anyone who's seen generative art, and like the people that rush projects out, we've all seen this, right, in our space. But outside of the space, this is like, what are you doing? Because the generative process is there's layers overlaid over the different main characters, right? And so that overlay takes a lot of time. If anyone that hasn't played with that, I mean, that is a very fine-tuned, you really have to play with the art, because you have to make sure that every possible variation of every possible combination of the layers overlays on top of that. But I mean, a bunch of degens do it pretty damn well. And like, I'm talking like the sword wasn't in the hand, it was like hovering in the middle. We had like the crown that was kind of offset. The glasses on the ones didn't even have a side to the glasses. It was as if they were wearing like bifocals. But this also just is a sign, like you mentioned, is it not caring? I struggle to say not caring because of the brand, right? Like, this isn't like a one-off season show that they're not even continuing to invest in, right? Like, I've heard, right, I think there's what, 7 spinoffs, and like 4 of them are in the Warner Brothers system. I mean, this isn't like so
it's not going away.
No. And I mean, and it was a digital, for context too, it was a digital collectible, right? So for those, like VV and like a lot of these other ones, but like my first thought was like VV got it right when it came to, their drops. Like, I got the Supergirl and Wonder Woman ones for my daughters, and like we were playing with them this weekend, where I can still do the AR, right? I can put the AR in the screen. I mean, and we have to also, like, this was dropped on Nifty's, which we fans of Nifty's. I also think it's probably the right platform, because it allows fiat, and it allows crypto, and it keep it in your wallet, but you also can kind of keep it in that custodial limbo. But like, I mean, there's some people that like, if you just search on Twitter Game of Thrones NFT,
good luck.
I mean, people zooming in. I think there's not even detail on the. So I mean, I don't want to spend too much of the episode on this, but we talked a lot last episode, and for anyone that didn't listen to it, like, Starbucks is doing it right. And the truth is, we haven't seen their Starbucks' art, but we wouldn't expect much from Starbucks' art. we would expect, high delivery of utility from Starbucks. and we would expect high delivery of art from Game of Thrones. And
Right.
unfortunately, that ball was dropped. But
What?
it's just one of those weird things, right? Of like what people are caring about, and like you said, who's checking this, and how did that even get out the door?
Right. Well, here's the thing though. Like, if this was Warner Brothers' first NFT drop, okay, maybe they underestimated the complexity of doing the generative art, but this wasn't. Like, this is not like this is their first time around. So that's why I'm sitting here. I'm like, I just don't know how that ball got dropped with the art. But like, I think you bring up a good point though around the actor's likeness and things like that, and they may not have permission. But I think like from a creative standpoint, that's where you could have had some fun with it. Maybe you come out with a cartoonish version of it. Maybe you come out with an AI version of it, right? An AI art version of it, right? Or maybe you do a hybrid. Like, you could still represent the characters in a different, unique way that could have evolved the story on the NFTs. Like, there's so much opportunity I think they had versus trying to get something very realistic to what the brand was. If this is what they're going to come out with, right? Like, that's where I don't know, man. It's hard for me to let them off the hook on this one. I'm still a fan of the show, still a fan of the brand, but as me and you are both obviously involved in this space. This was definitely a confused part of me sitting here. I'm like, man, like y'all missed a huge opportunity because they were going to onboard a lot of people just purely from the brand, right? And anybody in this space should be excited about a brand like this coming in and doing something like this for their fans and their following, because this is going to bring more people and eyeballs to the space. But hopefully they did a debrief after this and they fix it for the next time. Not call Fanzo and they need to hire you to
do some AI art for them that makes it it's not on character, right? And they pre-saled 3,500 and public sale 1,500. It sold out in 5 hours. It was 0.11 ETH or about $150 USD. So it's no joke, not laughable, right? People are giving Nickelodeon a hard time for Nickelodeon dropped at $50 with Recur, and that art was spot on. And then the last thing I'll mention on it, we're gonna jump into feet pics, which where the hell is this place going? But this was also one of those things I've talked a lot about in this space, is that I also want to see how these brands and projects handle adversity.
Right.
And I'm just going to tell you, there's been one tweet only from the NFT account. Now, granted, Nifty's, Warner Brothers, and HBO all tweeted out about the release of this NFT, right? So all three accounts tweeted pre-drop. Only the NFT account tweeted, and it was January 11th, and this was their tweet. It's a long one. Get ready for it. That was a rendering mistake. They were supposed to be little fingers, period. I just spent $150 on art I'd be embarrassed to put on my IG stories.
Right.
And your tweet public response is, that was a rendering mistake. They were supposed to be little fingers.
But it's crazy though. Like, this rendering should have been done weeks ago before the
100 tests. Yeah, I mean, you literally can test this. Like, for those that don't know, I've been a part of 50 rendering tests where people have sent me art and they're like, Fanzo, zoom in, find the errors. We need to know where we need to move stuff, right? And they announced this in October, and they already had dropped the Matrix, Nifty's, and Warner Brothers, right? So this isn't also even like the first brand. So I mean, hey, it is what it is. Hopefully they kind of make it, maybe they'll realize that winter was coming, and they'll kind of hopefully figure out what the hell's going on. But this last week, we can joke about a little bit about I got a lot of my circles. I was getting messages like, "Hey, Fanzo, degens are back. Like, there's some flipping going on," and there were some projects that had kind of popped off, and one of them was this feet pics one, which to me was kind of genius, whoever actually finally put this out there, because we know that porn pretty much pays and runs the internet, and the fact that like the number one thing that's searched in that demographic is feet. Like, the fact there wasn't one of these already. Like, we got goblins before we got feet. That's a little bit like, I didn't see that. But I will say, like, the project got some momentum. It reminded me a little bit of those I would say the last, let's just say a year ago vibes, right? I wouldn't say it was like the original fall, but it was about a year ago. That kind of took off. But then, I mean, maybe this is the pun that I'm curious your take on it. The feet pics, I believe, kick-started the ETH pump. I don't know. ETH had been stuck around that like 1,300 window for like ever, right? It felt like we've been sitting weeks. And then all of a sudden we get feed picks one day, and all of a sudden I remember this is how you know it, right? Like on my app, I have like one app that gives me daily updates, but I have other apps that give me updates based on percentage of jump. And I haven't seen those apps giving me updates in like a month and a half. Right. And all of a sudden, like my phone, I looked over, I'm like, what is going on? So what was your take on both feed picks and the ETH pump?
Correlation, causation is all I'm going to tell you right now. No, so here's the thing. This is something that's actually pretty interesting to kind of like start wrapping your head around if you haven't really thought about this, of like, and it's like the meme culture, right? And it's like there's really not any tangible value that you can, but there's so much societal value in play with this stuff, right? And I think this goes along with what you were saying with, feed and you know, how porn runs the internet and anything. They're kind of the bleeding edge on a lot of technology and media, right? If you look at history period. And so, I think when you start seeing memes, coins, we can look at Bonk, you can look at, the feed picks, whatever, all this stuff that, like, when we were talking about utility in the last episode, right? There's not any utility. Like, they explicitly say, hey, there's no channel, there's no utility. This is blah, 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 blah. But what that shows you is the value of getting a group of people excited and all going towards one goal or focus and driving attention. Because this is a game of attention. That's point blank period. This whole space is a game of attention. And so when you can show that, look, utility doesn't have to be in play if you know how to drive attention. Now, as an investor, I don't play that game personally, but it works, obviously. And so, like, you look at a project like Feed Picks, and we have a mutual friend who enjoys this stuff, right? And flips and stuff, and there's money to be made because you're timing. This is all a timing play, right? Just like Goblins was a timing. Well, I think Goblins a little bit more advanced than this, but this is, so I look at this as like, this shows that there's still the Kindles are still, or the fire is still kindling from a degen play in this space. But I would actually argue, I'm guessing this is not the end of feed picks. I'm guessing this is a launch strategy that they're executing extremely, extremely well, just kind of like what Goblins did. And they're going to come back on the backside with some utility, some new project, something like this. This is because they're doing a great job of capturing attention. I just look, they have over 1,100 ETH in volume, right? In about a week time frame, right? Like, there's projects that will never touch that in the lifetime of a project, right? So, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet that there's any correlation between this and ETH being at 1,600, all jokes aside. But what it does show me is there's still people in this space that want to continue to play in this space. And that's a good sign for the long run, no matter how we may feel, no matter what the charts say, no matter what headlines are reading, whatever, there's still people that are playing in this space. And that's all we need right now while we weather this storm until we get on the other side of this this bear market that we're in right now. But yeah, I personally do not own any feed picks.
I don't own any either. But I won't say that I didn't. I mean, I was looking at it, right? I enjoy that, because of all of the NFT plays, like, this is the highest risk play, right? Like, not even minting a new project, right? No. Figuring out where speculation, and truthfully, because there's so many, I don't even want to say influencers, right? There's so many alpha groups that move in with some heavy weight into projects like this. Yep. More than often than not, the individuals that aren't playing within alpha groups are the ones that get held holding a bag, right? Because they're circulating with 400 people, even 100 people, where they're like, hey, we're all holding. Hey, if it gets to 0.18, then we're going to slowly drip and start dumping. Well, for others, they're like, man, I was going to get in at 0.11. Then I decided at 0.15, I'm going to get in. I'm going to hold to 0.2. And little do they know, there's others that are kind of like moving some serious weight. And so I think for anyone that's, I agree with you. This is a good sign, because I do think this, like, I mean, let's face it, volume is still an important part of this speculation, ecosystem. Yep. The other thing is, I wanted to see like a couple other projects. Like, one of the things I've learned in the last 6 months in this space, like, there are some pumps, but let's face it, as soon as another project of any value drops, everyone dumps out of that. And it didn't happen as much on this one as I thought. So I think you're right. There might be a tie there, even in the sense of, ETH pumping. And I know I got some messages from some of you listeners, and I really love, the variety. We have people that got in the space a month and a half ago. We got people in the space, longer than we've been in this space. So it's a wide variety. And I got a couple messages from people in the audience, and we dabble in crypto here, and we're going to talk a little bit about some other ETH components as well. But a couple people messaged me and said, "Hey, Fanzo, I got all excited that ETH was all of a sudden moving, and then I went and checked the floor price of my favorite projects, and the floor prices are just tanking." And they had not seen that before. And I remember a little over 2 years ago, the first time that correlation hit me, and I was like, "What in the hell is going on? Like, what? Like, don't we all want ETH to move? How would you?" Because I'll kind of share how I thought of it, but like, there is definitely something we have to kind of wrap our heads around when it comes to like USD value, right? Because people can say an ETH is an ETH is an ETH, right? Like we hear that all the time, but there's a lot of people that aren't looking at it directly at ETH, right? They're looking at it at USD equivalent. So how do you kind of look at this idea that, ETH went on a hell of a run for the last couple of days, and it's still holding, and majority of projects, like, I mean, they're slightly recovering today, but the last couple of days have been down 30, 40, 50% on floor price in 24 hours.
Right. And this is when we start getting into the trading side of this place, right, of this space, right? When it comes to crypto, because at the end of the day, cryptocurrency, Ethereum is a token. It is a tradable token in the space, right? Just like a stock, but just obviously in this space. Now, what people need to understand is when you take your Ethereum, we'll stick with Ethereum here. When you take your Ethereum and go from sitting in my wallet to go buy an NFT, it's kind of like it kind of gets put into a vault, right? Like where that is just kind of like I transferred my liquidity from holding a token to now hold a digital collectible or an NFT token. But what happens is that value of that ETH that you put in, the 0.1 or 0.2, that continues to fluctuate based off of what the price of ETH is. So if I bought ETH at $1,000 and I put it into a project, I put a 1 ETH into a project, and now it's at it's almost $1,600. That's a 60% increase in value that I got. So I need to sell that NFT, and I can actually sell it less than what I bought it for and actually still make out with more money at that point in time. So whatever, like I can take a loss, quote unquote, on the NFT from an ETH perspective, but my US dollar perspective, or if I transfer to USDC, which is the stable coin of US dollars, that's actually going to increase. So I've actually increased my overall portfolio value. So that's what's happened a lot is, this is just another data point you need to kind of keep an eye on. I'm not gonna say it happens every single time, but if you play in the NFT space, you need to keep an eye on this piece of data of, hey, what is the price of ETH and what direction is it going? Because typically people want to take profits when ETH is increasing, and so they're gonna sell out these NFTs to get their ETH back, take some profit, and then maybe they'll reinvest back in or just keep the ETH depending on what their strategy is. But that's 100% ETH or NFTs is just a whole. I personally look at it as it's a holding container of my ETH, but at some point it's going to come back to ETH. But that ETH value is going to change when I put it in without the value of the NFT actually changing.
And that's like a little bit of like NFT cost averaging, right? Instead of dollar cost averaging.
Right.
And I think that also like the thing that I know that I if you go back and listen to episodes I did a year ago, right? I was warning people a lot on the listing of NFTs as well, right? Because one of the things that we saw, like I went and jumped in a couple projects. Goblin Town happened to be one of them. BAP happened to be one of them. And I went in and looked, and a lot of it was WETH offers accepted when ETH took off, right? So for anyone that's kind of thinking, like, it's not as much people are like immediately dumping, but there are some people that are like, you know what? I don't want to accept it at 0.8 ETH because 0.8 ETH is $1,100, right? Well, all of a sudden ETH takes that shot, and 0.8 ETH accepting that is now 1350, and you're like, oh, 1350. I sound like I could get out of here at 1350. I'm in for 700. Like people will click that WETH offer. And so I know for many, like that's kind of where, because I as soon as I jumped into the data, right? So I think that's also important. Like it's not always a red flag that people are dumping out. There are some people that, if they were thinking about taking a WETH offer before and ETH goes up, they're going to take the WETH offer now. Like it's
100%.
it's like almost a no brainer in that sense. And there's also a different, we probably could do a whole episode on, like, I think it's a different style of NFT trader and NFT
Right.
consumer buyer seller that looks at the WETH side of, because I don't play much in that side of the house. Like I don't
Yeah.
make a lot of WETH offers myself, and I think I've only accepted, man, I don't even know, two maybe WETH offers in
Right.
my entire all these NFTs I could just
That's a lot of NFT purchases.
it just doesn't play in my space, but it's just something to keep in mind, and which is another reason, like, be careful when you're putting offers in, be careful when you're listing your NFTs, just be aware of like all these moving variables. It's also why I love the space, right? Because
Yeah.
you could technically, if you're keeping ETH in ETH, you could get some really sweet deals of people that all of a sudden wanted to dump out, and you're like, hey, I have no, like, this USD equivalent is not what I care about, right? It's like,
Right.
hey, if I know that I have, whatever your bag, you started with 4 ETH in your bag, and the 4 ETH bag is what you're focusing on. I mean, some of these, there's two projects, not the two I mentioned, but there's two other ones.
Yeah.
One of them dropped from 10.5 ETH to under 8, and
Wow.
I did not see that coming. And I know for a fact, two of our listeners jumped in and like swept, like, bought 7 of them, because they were kind of like, oh, I feel like I missed the under 10 ETH moment of that, and then all of a sudden that, like, it went
It's
way
here.
under, right? And especially for them, their ETH isn't USD, because they're dollar cost averaged in for the long term. But
Right.
that wasn't the only, ETH moving up, but there were some other things around ETH, and we survived through the news of last week with the economy as well. But you want to jump into something that, a little bit about Shanghai as well?
Yeah. And I want to jump in that in a second, but I also want to bring up a good point to what you just said, just to wrap that up real quick.
Yeah.
Is, I think if you're in it for the long haul, if you truly saying I'm going to be like, I'm playing in ETH for the long term, you're not going to worry too much about USD value, right? And so there are going to be those opportunities, right? The people that I feel like are worrying about the USD value are the ones that are trying to get money back into USD, right? Now there's also that small group of people that trade ETH that will trade it to USDC and then trade it back to ETH to continue to time the market a little bit and stack their bags. But if you truly believe the value of ETH, because I'm sitting here looking at ETH, it's like, it's 1,500. I'm like, I like ETH when it was 4,000, right? And I think it's going to go beyond that, right? Like, This is like, we went up from 1,100 to 1,500. Like, that's cute. I remember when ETH was $120 and we went to $40 or $400 and back down. And, so it's like, if you're in it long enough, like, I feel like you get less swayed by these fluctuations. But exactly what you said, you can take advantage of the opportunities that are out there, right? And so I will tell you this, and this is something I picked up from your show early on in my NFT journey, was any offers I put out there, WETH offers, or if I'm selling an NFT, it's hardly ever more than 3 days. I never put it more than 3 days, because things can change so fast in this space that an offer that I put in a day, if I put a 30-day offer in or a 30-day time period into this, man, like, you can get wrecked very, very quickly on both sides. So it's just like, I would rather frequently go update that and make sure that I'm taking a look at the data, what's going on in the space. Well, what's the floor trending like? What are the prices looking like from the underlying token, or what are the traits that I'm trying to sell? Like, all that stuff I'm taking into account when I'm buying and I'm selling. And that's why it's always on a shorter term basis, because there are opportunities like this. And this is also from my own personal side. This is why I typically always have ETH sitting in a specific wallet ready for opportunities like this, right? Just sitting on the sidelines. So when you see these things pop off, you're like, oh, I have the liquidity. I can go take advantage of it without having to go exit something else to be able to get that liquidity as well. So, it's like you said, this is part of the fun and the game of, there's a lot of moving pieces, and this just adds another layer of complexity to it. But I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for people that want to pay attention to that. So that's why I want to end with that. But 100%. When it comes to the exciting stuff happening in ETH, because obviously, the biggest event in Ethereum history happened last year with the merge. And I feel like for majority of the people in their space, like, all right, cool, the merge happened, let's just get back to normal operation. Like that's just phase one in a sense, right? There's a lot more things that are happening. And if you guys were aware, it's called Saigon, I believe. Is that Saigon? I think that's what it's called. Is the next? No, Shanghai. I gotta get, geography was not my strong suit. No. Yeah, Shanghai is happening. It's supposed to be happening, I think, in March of this year. And if for the listeners that aren't aware, before the merge happened, there was a lot of people that staked Ethereum to the ETH for the ETH 2.0 kind of rollout, right? From the POW to the POS frameworks or protocols. And so all that ETH that has been staked, and if I remember, I looked, there's 16 million tokens, ETH tokens staked, locked up, not
20,
able
so
to
22 billion total stake in the contract, 16 million that is currently staked with the network that is playing in this. I mean, these are numbers. These are like, when everyone, I think that those numbers are important to piece in there. And you're right. That upgrade is what is kind of like that next phase.
Right. It's that next phase. And I think it's going to be coming out here in the next 2 months, I would say, give or take, based off the announcement that we heard last week that the testnet was, I think they did a first transaction or withdrawal testnet last week, and it was successful, which is a good sign. And so, like, what I want to ask you is, when you got 16 million ETH tokens, or basically at this price, I think it's like 25 billion at the current rate of ETH right now, being able to get accessed by the people in this space, that's a lot of liquidity that people are going to have access to. What do you think people are going to do with that liquidity? You think they're going to hold? Do you think they're going to deploy it? How do you think that's going to have a play in, whether it's the NFT space or just the Ethereum space in general?
I think this is when we think of, like, we have to like break down personas, right? Because
right,
who are the personas of the people that were staking this pre-merge, right? With the implied piece of, like, hey, there's gonna be a dip after the merge. We got to get through the fall. We're in the middle. We're kind of going through not only the end of kind of an end of a pandemic, but also kind of like phasing off of what, into a recession. And who knows what the hell a recession is defined as of right now. So, like, the people that have that 16 million that will now be released, right? So that they locked it in contract to kind of push us through phase one, which was the merge prior to the surge. And so the Shanghai upgrade, like you said, was tested. The virtual machine was actually, deployed as well on the test net, which I love, like, knowing, like, some of these components that they're putting out, because they are doing some really cool things. And it's definitely gonna, it's gonna have some interesting kind of like downward effects that, that many that, like, are writing contracts and that are, playing within the ETH environment are going to feel, but it's not going to, impact everyone, except for, like you said, that is a lot of liquidity in the market. Now, the question will be kind of like how that, like, restaking, non-staking goes. How many of them are going to put anything into NFTs? How many of them are going to put things into, and this is an interesting one, how many of them are going to invest in some of these tokenomics, gaming tokens, NFT project tokens that have kind of launched since people staked it, right? Because a lot, you mentioned Bonk, which was, one that kind of, like, over, Solana based, crypto that, altcoin that kind of dropped recently. And then we have, like, a lot of these ones that are, like ApeCoin, that are kind of aligned there. So I think one of the things that'll be interesting is that, where, because this is March, right? So we get 2 months from now. I think the question will end up being, where is the crypto market itself trending? Are we? I think, no one really. I mean, I haven't found an expert that has any idea, like, really where we're at right now, right? Like, I mean, I could see us staying sideways again for a while, right? Just because, and I just pulled it up, right, for the last, and this is also something for context for our listeners, right? A pump during a pump time wouldn't change the NFT environment that much. But I just pulled up, and, in the last 30 days, right? So 30 days ago, the ETH price was, I'm going to tell you, it was $1,180 30 days ago, right? And then if you look at it when we were, let's just say 7 days ago, it was at 1263. So we were, like, right in, like, an $80 window. But then in the last 7 days, it went from 1263 to 1580. And so, that is like it's like almost like an unpredicted pump, versus, like, when we saw this before, when there was pumps happening, I didn't see as much NFT dumping. But the interesting part will be what gets us into March with some of this unlocking on the dev net. And, we also just have to give credit where credit's due. Ethereum, the .org and the team that are doing the tech, I mean, they're being transparent and they're kicking butt. I mean, like, take it or leave it. I mean, Ethereum, that ETH, Poly, Bitcoin, kind of like top of the rung, doing things and executing. I mean, you mentioned, we all kind of forgot. I mean, we can thank Sam Bankman-Fried for not only did he lose $8 billion that he apparently now found, but he decided to like, oh, you thought that Ethereum thing was great. Let's corner the news market for like the next 6 months. But I think it'll be interesting. I think these are things, as a poker player, right? Like, actually, I'm wearing a World Series of Poker official T-shirt right now, which I didn't even realize. But as a poker player, I love variable management, like the idea that there's so many variables at play. And like for some people, they're like, just give me 2 variables. Like, I want to play the cards that I got, and I want to play the percentages I have to win. For me, where I believe the edge for advanced thinking in this is when you start to add up the variables, right? Like, what is the percentage chance of that person playing? How much does that person have behind them? How often are they playing? Has that person's, spouse come over and checked on them and gave them a 30-minute warning so they have a chance of like shipping their cards all in because they want to, go broke or double up, right? Like all of these additional variables, that excites me because it allows you to start lining things up, putting yourself in position to kind of like be ready when things drop. Like you mentioned, having your ETH kind of locked and loaded as liquidity. And it's funny, the 1 month episode of the podcast, season 1, I remember the episode very clearly that like the whole podcast episode was the lesson I learned that having liquidity available to deploy is more valuable than owning a third or fourth or fifth of an NFT. If your favorite project, it's more valuable than like, I'm going to try out these 3 or 4 other projects and drain that wallet. And that lesson is so hard to recognize because a lot of people are like, oh, well, I have ETH. I might as well pick up, a fourth of this collection, right? But you don't know if there's a Gary V tweet. You don't know if there's an ETH announcement. You don't know if we have Shanghai coming through. So like, like to your point, like this is exciting. And, I think it's also exciting from an innovation perspective because let's face it, it took them 3 years to deliver on something they originally told us they were going to deliver on 3 years ago.
Right. Now we're doing 2 within 6-month period.
Within 6-month period, right? And people in this space do get a little bit of and I think maybe it's a good thing. We sometimes if you start to deliver positively, we almost forget the negative, right? Like 100%. I mean, D-Gods and Utes, right? Like I minted D-Gods and then I was like, oh my God, it literally they rugged us, right? And then like, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't rug you. And then all of a sudden it became what D-Gods became.
They cashed a $3 million check.
yeah, no kidding. Kudos to them. Congrats on the Polygon combo there. But I will say the other part of this that and I see we have some of our live friends watching. I see Cheesecake and KT Kiltman are out there watching on YouTube as well. The thing I think of, for many of us that are in this space right now, we also just need a little bit of like something positive to look forward to.
Right.
And we might have thought it was the Game of Thrones drop because Game of Thrones couldn't drop the art there.
Absolutely not.
No. But I'm glad you brought up Shanghai. When you brought it up to talk about in this episode, I was like, hey, I didn't even cross my mind about bringing that into the conversation, but it's such an important one and a variable, especially because a majority of the NFTs that, not all, but majority of NFTs that we're talking about right now, if they're not Ethereum, they are directly impacted either layer 2 or sister blockchain of Ethereum. So yeah, it's definitely interesting times.
100%. And I think one thing to keep in mind too is like when the Shanghai comes out, and I think they said it was a March timeframe. That's why I keep referencing the March timeframe. It's not like it just opens up the floodgates, right? Right. I think if I remember, I saw it like there's going to be, I think it could take up to a year or something like that for if people want to actually exit all the validators to actually get access to that staked Ethereum, right? So it's like it's going to be a slow drip in a sense if people want to exit that. But at the same time, I think it's what's going to be interesting to see is how many validators, because if I remember correctly, it was like 300, almost 400,000 validators that people actually
400,000
staked it, right? And so it's going to be, what does that percentage look like in 6 months? What does that look like in 12 months to see either the people that are sticking in there and or the ones that are saying, all right, cool, I earned my APY on my staked ETH, I'm taking it back and I'm going to go deploy it somewhere else. But yeah, I think moral of the story is, and here's the thing, Fanzo, like, when you're talking about keeping liquidity, and liquidity is your best friend in this space, this isn't just in the NFT space or the crypto space. This is where people always talk about. This is where people make a crap ton of money in bear markets. Why? Because they're buying things at discount because they have the liquidity. It's not tied up into capital. It's not tied up into assets, and they can deploy it, in real estate or businesses that are going under or whatever it may be. It's the same principles apply in this space as well. When you tap all your liquidity, you have just removed your flexibility, and flexibility is crucial in this space because you never want to be forced to sell an asset just to get liquidity, right? That's when you make, uninformed decisions and you take L's when you probably shouldn't have to take L's. So it's just when you're smart on how you deploy your capital and how much you keep back, it gives you more flexibility to take advantage of opportunities where others may have not thought through all this as well. And I think this is where with people getting access to ETH like this, it's kind of like a stimulus package in a sense, right? Like it's like, hey, now we got more ETH to play with. What are people going to do with it? They may keep it staked. They may deploy it. They may just hold on to it, and obviously there's going to be some pretty big launches, I feel like, coming up, whether it's Yuga, whether it's Suzuki's anniversary or whatever like this. So I think there needs to be some liquidity put into the NFT space for sure. But we'll see what people end up doing. It'll be interesting.
Definitely. And the liquid staking is coming up as well, right? So that's liquid staking derivatives, like that piece will be interesting.
Yep.
I did just see, one of the notes that we had here, majority of the people that put it in, like 70% of them are at a loss, right? But
right.
we also don't know if they're at a current loss, right? But we don't know what March will be at, based on that launch, that loss. And then also like where that kind of factors in, to the springtime decisions. And let's also just be very clear. If you're on the other side of this and you're not a collector, you want to launch a project. These are variables you want to pay attention to, right? Because trying to launch that week before that, the ETH, like just like the ETH merge side, right? Like the ETH merge got a lot of, let's just say, press on Twitter spaces from all of us in the space. But a lot of it was kind of like telling people like, you got to watch moving parts. And that goes into big players, it goes into blockchain, it goes into crypto, but it also goes into innovation outside that is going to open people's mind. And so I think we were gonna, kind of talk here at the end around, like AR, VR is such an interesting conversation.
Right.
I've said this before. I was a Google Glass owner. So
of course you were.
Yeah,
of course you were.
Surprise anybody. And funny enough, I sold it. And a month later, I took a job at the data center as a technology evangelist. And one of the very first things that my team got to do was deploy Google Glass in our data center so that we could actually see. And it was actually a pretty cool execution of it because we could visualize the temperature gauges, switches, and things that we could not see, right? Only digitally. Like, so if I was walking down a row of servers, and there was a pipe at the end, I could actually see what that temperature was set at to cooling all of these visually with the Google Glass, where if I didn't have Google Glass, I would have to run all the way back up to the crow's nest to check the computer and then run my happy butt. And so
wow,
there was some really cool, like data overlaid, right? But I also remember feeling like it's a cool data center use case, but it was also like we were trying to upgrade the tech in the data center, and eventually that tech would be so good that it was going to be sending it to our Apple Watch in the first place, right? So it was cool to have it overlaid, but we also, I got to play, recently with the kind of the Meta Quest, which I had played early on with Meta Quest. I hadn't played with it in a long while, and I will say I mean, I think I'm impressed. I'm not a gamer by any stretch of the imagination. And my gaming was Madden. That'll qualify. I was a Madden and Tiger Woods golf. Like you bring me
right. When Michael Vick was on the cover.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. But when we think about AR, VR, there's some people that got into the play. Some of them got out. We heard recently that Facebook announced their next level, their highest level, which I think is at a price point $1,700 to $2,200. But just like all this tech, it always gets deployed at a high rate. TVs, high HD TVs were $8,000 for about 10 years, and now at Walmart you can get a really, really nice one for about $150.
Right.
But there's some other players in this space that are coming around. What's your take on who's coming in and kind of what we should be looking for?
Man, I'm excited for this. And this obviously ties into the metaverse as well, right? Like that's why we want to talk about this as well, right? Because we've had many conversations, where the metaverse is a combination of hardware and software, right? And hardware always takes longer to develop than software, right? That's plain and simple. That's how it's always been in many industries. And I think we're getting some traction on the hardware side, right? I mean, because you think about it, 2 or 3 years ago, you remember when you had to have VR goggles that actually had to be attached to a computer,
Yep, with a
right? Like
long cable. Yep.
you had to be tethered. I remember an Austin
It had to
startup.
be like a physical computer, not even a
Right,
laptop.
right. No, it was a tower. You had
Yep.
a special tower built for this, right? And so, and when Oculus came about, and I still call it Oculus, MetaQuest, whatever they call it now, before Facebook acquired them, like that was the first, like one of the first, success stories of being hands free, right? And then obviously they've evolved it. I think they've had two Oculus versions, and now they're the third one just came out with a $1,500 one. But Apple. Obviously, I think this is the big gorilla in the room in this space that's finally coming out. I think this year we saw they'll be announcing probably around the world or the WWDC Worldwide Developer Conference. Will probably be announcing and probably be on sale later this year. Is their AR VR goggles, and they're taking a little bit different approach. I think they're taking that whole hybrid approach where it's not complete VR like an Oculus is, but it's also playing on the AR side of things and I think they're doing that for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, I think they realize it's gonna be they've been saying it for years. Tim Cook's been saying this for years. They believe in mixed reality over virtual reality, right? The combination of all the above. But they also, you remember, like they can't cannibalize their iPhone business. It's like off the within a 2-year period, right? So there has to be some sort of bridge into this new technology from a business sense, right? So when I look at Facebook, or excuse me, with Apple jumping into this space, and I think we saw their price tag is going to be $3,000, and like at first you're like, holy crap! My first Oculus, the one that I own, I paid $350 for it, $300 for it, and I love it. It's not even the newest one, right? It's the second one, and so. But like when you look at Apple coming out here at $3K for their AR VR goggles, I always think about it from, okay, history doesn't repeat itself, but it leaves clues, right? When you start looking at what was it, the first iPhone that came out was in 2007. I think it was like $650.
Yep.
And that price point was double what the BlackBerry was. And it was almost 5x what everybody else was using, which was a Motorola Razr at the point in time. We were paying $100 or $120 for those phones, right? And so just like you said, like that first iteration is always going to be the most expensive. But guys, don't worry, Fanzo will still be the first in line to get it. But then, but from there, I think the what I'm really excited about is just Apple jumping into this space for us. Because if you think about this, you look at Facebook, for example. You got Facebook who's all in the metaverse. Like they've lost $30 billion in the last 2 years trying to get this thing off the ground. They finally put legs on themselves.
Invested, not lost. Invested.
Okay, cool. It's an L, right? Come on, Zuck, call it a spade, right? But you look at that, like, so Apple or Facebook does, I think, 120, 130 billion in revenue a year, right? And they're trying to lead the charge in this space. You have Apple, who does about 400 billion in revenue in a year. They're like, hey, that's cute, Facebook. Here's what we're coming in. We're taking a different approach to this. We're not doing this AR VR. We're doing AR VR, because if you think about what they're going to be able to do with this, and I saw they were already working on this. Think of Google Maps through AR VR, right? Think of how the existing ecosystem that they've already trained us on for the last 15 years now, operating in this iOS ecosystem. They're going to be able to adapt all this and own this walled garden. But this brings up a point I would love to get your thought on, though. Apple is known, they are known for operating in their walled garden. Like, you do not get an iOS unless you pay the 30% tax. So like when it comes to Web3, which our ethos is all about interoperability, which is all about decentralization, which is all about open source, how do you balance that Apple coming into play in this game? I'll share my thoughts on this, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are of them kind of jumping into this hardware side of the metaverse play. Because I could actually see them coming out with their own version of a metaverse once they have the hardware in place, because they're very good at both software and hardware.
I mean, they're the best. I mean, they're the best at it, right? And you mentioned, Facebook is in here flexing weight in the space, right? Facebook is smart. Right. They recognize that the owning people's data and playing in this Web 2 platform has a short lifespan, right? Like, let's just be very clear. This hasn't been around. The iPhone hasn't been around for that long. Facebook, owning Instagram, which was remember when they bought Instagram, was the dumb decision everybody thought, right? They bought it for whatever it was, $4 billion, and it's now worth $40 billion and generating them like $20 billion a year. you mentioned Facebook, right? We have Apple. Recent news: Walmart invested heavily into the metaverse, and AWS, Amazon, which is let's face it, the other kind of massive player is moving in.
They
this
just run
space.
90% of the internet. That's all.
No, that's it. Just 90% of the internet. And so I think one of the things I always look at is what are on ramps for people into Web3,
Yep.
right? So like for them to, because like one of the things is like, how do I visualize your NFTs? And like for those that don't see it, and the brand didn't sponsor, so I'm not going to say the brand that I have. I have my AI art NFTs that are above my head right now in the video. But like like my daughter saw that, and my daughter's view of my AI art that I created changed when they came over my house this weekend, because they're like, oh my, they got to actually see it, right? And for a lot of people, you have to like see it, smell it, feel it. And for anyone that's not put on an Oculus yet, like one of the things that blew my mind the very first time was like the surround sound with nothing over your ears is just amazing. Like it's like you're like, wait a second. I don't have you're not wearing AirPods, you're not wearing, your ears are clear. Like it's just you have the headset on, but they've really defined that environment, right? So I was in a Twitter space the other night, and and a shout out to, I believe it was the Ape Liquid space. They play poker. There's a bunch of them that are playing poker in Oculus, sitting around talking to each other. I immediately was like, okay, now I might need to not wait till Apple comes out. I might have to go Oculus first. But the other part of this that I think is interesting is you mentioned, the walled garden existed for many reasons, right? For many reasons, if you go back to Apple versus Microsoft and Bill Gates, right? The idea of Windows on every machine, right? And it was like, no, Apple on only Apple devices. You don't get a right click on your mouse. You only get a mouse, right? Like that was the early, and I even have a throwback to one of the iMacs over my shoulder, right? Of those days. But it also, if we think about what it created, right? For anyone that hated that like kind of combo, it created the largest app store, more jobs in the mobile app world than anything else, even close, right? Because it did force people to play, where the attention is. And I know our Android listeners will remind us that they have majority of international market share. And I understand that, right? But the thing that one of the signs that to answer your question that jumped at me is, if you remember, Apple came out and was like, hey, we want 30% of all in-app transactions on these crypto ones. And then someone had to give a little Apple education to say, there's these miners, and we're paying gas not for our health. And you don't really get that money because it's not an exchange of value. We're paying that to actually interact on this blockchain. And I feel like those type of things, like because I think the question ends up being, how do they embrace the blockchain long term? Which I think Apple goes all in there. I think blockchain, the owner's side of the house, right, where you're not even going to have a, let's face it, the AT&Ts, the T-Mobiles of the world, they will disappear into the ethos of where this is all going, in the very near future. But the short-term play, I do think it's a hybrid approach. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see, because the mock-ups of the initial VR, and like rumors are like 80% of it will be VR, 20% will be AR, but it kind of looks like snowboard goggles for
like ski goggles.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have that as their main product, but then they didn't roll out like a Google Glass style AR more friendly. And that one was an open ecosystem, right? Almost for them to be like, how can I get developers that aren't currently in the Apple world to start playing? And we also even saw, you and I were joking about this pre-show, they're moving away from lightning cable and they're moving to USB-C for the phone, right? We also know like they're doing that for wireless charging, right? The new mats that are coming out. There's also a rumor going around that the actual MagSafe, which I love on my Apple device,
saved me so many times.
Oh my goodness, it's the greatest thing ever. The MagSafe rumor is that Apple actually might let others develop on MagSafe other products and services on that, which I think might be a sign of what we could see to come. But the thing that I think is the most interesting though is, and it goes back, and I'd love to hear your take, is I think they end up opening the ecosystem on these areas of hardware software, and they close the ecosystem of the metaverse. I think if you want to play in their metaverse, you come through their world. But if you want to use their tech to take advantage of a lot of the other things, because a lot of this functionality for AR, VR is going to live outside of just like what you would consider a fully immersive metaverse experience. But I mean, pretty I mean, pretty interesting to see kind of like where Apple's going to go with that. And
100%.
they launch things better than everybody. The cloud, just for history purposes, real quick, the cloud had no adoption. I was working in cloud computing at a data center, and we could not get anyone to figure out the cloud. Everyone thought it was in the air. They thought when you store it in the cloud, there was like this random servers that floated off in like Elon Musk's satellites. But then all of a sudden, Apple rolled out this thing called iPhoto and your photo stream. And all of a sudden, cloud became, I can just pay and then I have my photos stored somewhere else, not on my device.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, SaaS took off. All of a sudden,
Yep.
Box, Dropbox, all of those, like for those that don't remember, like it wasn't until Apple set truthfully, they had the most convoluted cloud play of all, but they brought it to market in a sense that let people like tangibly be like, I don't mind my photos like from 5 years ago not being on my device to free up space, and I just pay a little bit of service. And then that kind of put us where we're at today. I hope that is like the Web3 vehicle that Apple kind of delivers to us. What's your take on the Apple?
100%. And that's and just honing on that for a second, like cloud computing was one of the main pillars that got us into Web 2. Right. That was one of the foundational pillars that set up how we operate today. Like 99% of software is SaaS now, right? You just think about that. Like this is when you remember Salesforce, their whole slogan was no CRM, because before Salesforce, there was never a cloud version of a CRM for businesses at this level, right? So like cloud changed the game. And like you said, there's no other business out there that knows how to launch a product than Apple. And I would even say that, I mean, you go back to the Steve Jobs era, they were even better then, right? Versus the Tim Cook era, right? But like, that's what gets me excited is they are market makers and market movers. That's how big that company is, right? So when you look at, they are investing resources in developing a product, which is going to be a flagship product for them, just like the iPhone was a flagship product for them, just like an Apple Watch has been a flagship product. It is going to be one of their products that's going to have their own line item on their quarterly reports. And there's headset, maybe not this exact version, but this will be our own division. We know where we're going in the direction this is going, right? This is going to the metaverse. And I 100% agree with what you said. Apple's not dumb. Like Apple knows that they're going to become the next $1 trillion company on this next play here, because they understand, hey, the money's not in the software. The money's not even the hardware. The money's not even in the actual software. It is in the virtual world. When people you want a 30% tax in an app store, wait till what they're going to be paying Apple. Apple's going to be taking in bank loads of money inside of a metaverse play. So like when there's virtual transactions happening, like Fortnite's proved this model out, right? Just from a gaming standpoint. And so when you look at Apple that knows how to launch, that already has, 1.2 billion iPhone users. You want to talk about onboarding with trust,
access to people,
right? Like, so like they have all this stuff in alignment for them. They have access to people. They know how to launch. They have the hardware. They have the software. They have the skill sets. They have the treasure chest of either acquiring companies or going and developing their own tech. Nah, man, these guys are going to crush this space. And that's what gets me excited, because I honestly, like, they do a very good job in a PR standpoint of making it look like Apple's is great, good for everybody's company. But we all know that there may not be all the truth on the top of line of that. But at the end of the day, they're not the worst company out there to lead this charge, right? They're not monetizing our data to the extent that some of these people are some of these companies are. But I would say though, with Apple being able to lead this charge, because I as you were talking about Google Glass, I started thinking about Google. I'm like, Google's just been kind of silent in the background, I feel like, playing right now, right? When we're looking at the big tech players. But like, when has Google really been good at developing products? Google's great at software.
They're great at being Google. They're great at being Google and making ads, right? And right now they're running around like a chat GPT animal, because they're trying to fence off Bing, which will be interesting.
Right. Well, when Microsoft acquires ChatGPT and they actually start crushing it with Bing, we'll see how Google responds with that. But anyways, I say all that because like Apple is one of the few companies that can do hardware and software extremely, extremely, extremely well. Even Amazon. Amazon's not that good at products. They're good at copying products. They're good at Amazon basics, but they're very good. They have a great ecosystem, but like the design, the quality, that's why I'm never going to leave the iOS ecosystem, because I just know things work. They have a great user experience. And think about this too. What's one of the biggest hurdles in our space right now? UX, UI design. Who is amazing at UX, UI design?
There's no one
Apple.
better. Yep.
Right. And now think about this. What is one of the biggest risk and pain points in this space? Crypto wallets. That's where people are making dumb mistakes with crypto wallets, right? We see it legitimately every single day on Twitter or in a Discord or whatever like this.
Even God.
Even God himself makes mistakes with crypto wallets. If you sit here and think about Apple has 1.2 billion iPhone users, they're going to be jumping into the AR VR world. Basically, as they're on ramp into the metaverse. Why is there not going to be they're not going to tie in a crypto wallet into their device? Why won't they have their own wallet at that point in time? And a closed ecosystem where there's not going to be third party and all those other stuff. So I think there's going to be a lot of innovation Apple's going to be doing once they kind of come over this Web3 crypto and really embrace it. Because like you were saying, like when they came out that 30% tax on NFT apps, they showed they were not they're pretty ignorant in this space if they thought that they were going to capture gas fees on that, and they had to get corrected pretty quickly. And they kind of went away fairly quickly from a PR standpoint. So I think just the evolution of when a player like this comes into space, we should all be excited. But with it, we can't make the same mistakes we've made in Web 2 from a tech and a centralized standpoint. I think the next debate is going to be the centralized versus decentralized kind of metaverse play. And I think, we're still 5-10 years away from this true, fully immersive experience. I think that we kind of get this perception of, and I think that's why it's so smart to have this mixed reality standpoint. Cause I think this is like the Web 2.5 version of a metaverse that we're going to ease people into this full virtual reality versus you look at the Facebooks of the world that are like full VR. People like me and you, we love it. But like, I remember I've had my mom go out in my garage, my little area that I have my VR set up in, and she's like, whoa, like she's freaking out. Like she thought it was cool, but like my mom ain't going to buy a VR set.
Right.
Like that ain't happening, right? She just got an iPhone 6 years ago. Like she ain't getting a VR set, right? And so it's like there's that onboarding that Apple just know how to adopt technology and spoon feed it to the mass adoptions that a lot of people in this space don't know how to do it, that they've been excelling at for decades now at this point in time.
And to hammer that last point you made too on let's not make the same mistakes. I've heard a lot about the the working conditions with some of these big brands, right? And let's face it, if we can do our due diligence and our leadership as those that believe in decentralization, if we put supply chain on chain, right? We start recognizing that a lot of these things are no longer okay, right? We need to know where the devices are coming from, how they're coming across, where they're being manufactured, where the choke points are, who's getting paid what. All of that like layers of transparency, we have to get there. And these companies are going to take baby steps to get there because we know that they have there's a profit margin that they've just been crushing. And as much as we might love some of these companies, they're not going to take a massive L to all of a sudden appease us. But if they start being, if they start being the ones that onboard people into the metaverse, right, or even into this AR VR play, it's also going to start to kind of address that issue. And I heard this issue a lot, especially a year ago. It's not as much as where people love debating, is the metaverse really Web3? Because it's not. It doesn't have to be decentralized. And then people argue, Roblox versus Fortnite versus Decentraland versus Spatial. And shout out to Spatial. They just had a really cool update to their entire metaverse experience, which I'm excited to check that out in immersive. But yeah, this is exciting, right? And I think for everyone that's listening to the podcast, you're listening to this right now, while we're recording it, in this same week or the same month, what we just have to look at is a lot of these signs are what go from people being afraid of changing to being curious of changing, and that is everything for us to educate, right? Because afraid to change because there's not enough players, and if it's just Facebook and they have their own bad impression of Facebook and metaverse and they don't understand the rest of this, and we're trading JPEGs and monopoly money. But if all of a sudden, like, that thing that's on their wrist, that thing that's in their pocket, that they just signed up for an Apple credit card and they have an Apple, they use Apple Pay because they never thought they were going to do that. And, and like all of a sudden, like those little things start to click. That's exciting. The last thing I wanted to throw out there, as we kind of wrap up, as we did like another hour, as we do here on the podcast, there are some projects that are innovating and executing and really showing up right now in this space. And I think it's important. We've had many guests on the podcast season 1, and and this, Jordache, is as someone that I was referencing, using your advice and wisdom as well, is like anyone that I had as a guest, good and bad, right? I did as much research as I could to like understand what their play was, where they're going, how these things are falling. And I will just say, I am really damn proud to say that so many of the guests that we had that like were guests and they had a project are building and delivering like wildfire, right? And I'm gonna give you a couple examples, and I'm not paid for promoting. This isn't pumping my bag. It's more acknowledging, like, hey, they showed up and said some things in this podcast, right? There's a couple projects that said something in this podcast, and I haven't heard from them in 4 months, right? But I'm gonna focus on some of on the good, and like one of them was actually today. The Meta Whips, which our 1 year anniversary of that interview actually will be, I think, actually the day this episode releases. Meta Whips from West Coast Customs, their Solana Mint Pass or whatever got airdropped into my Phantom wallet today. I'd signed up for their game that they've been building for 4 years. I've said this many times. I think Meta Whips is the slow burn project that we are going to look back on and be kind of amazed at what they deliver in a metaverse and a gaming experience. So, like, I mean, kudos, love seeing that from like they didn't mint out, they didn't hit their numbers initially in January that they thought. And rather than like continuing to like slow burn for forever, they shrunk their supply. Then they've been just delivering, straight through. It happens to be my Twitter PFP because my Twitter PFP is broken. I can't change my PFP. And then there were some others, right? Jordache, we have, shout out to, Bulls and Apes. Bulls and Apes, we had them on the podcast. Been a big fan of them. They were the ones that had the 6-month guarantee. We had lots of rumors about, Bulls have been doing great. They've been having tokenomics. I know, Jordache, you've done some work with them as well. And like we both were holders. They rolled out the Apes and their initial pre-sale. And what was it? 5,000?
5,000? Yeah, they crushed. I think they started with 1,500 pre-sale. They bumped it up to 5,000. I think they sold those out like in 34, 36 minutes, all 5,000 of them. So at a 0.22 price too. So crushed it.
And every week they're showing up. They're creating content.
Right.
They're in their Discord. They're doing Twitter Spaces. So shout out to Bulls and Apes. Another one I want to give a shout out to, Ape Liquid, project that I'm very big fan of. They have a role-playing game that is using AI art to really create these different events. Saturday night, I was in a Twitter space with a couple hundred people that were all kind of playing this role-playing game. And we were all watching what was happening. We would burn one of our NFTs to create this event in the game, which would then airdrop us different components. And they're just doing some really cool things. They've also, their 1 year anniversary of doing a Twitter space Monday through Friday every week is coming up next week. And like, let's just put that out there. There are not projects that are at that level that are, really kind of, fully executing, which I'm, really excited to see, like something like that. I mean, it's just cool, right? It's refreshing to be like, because when I had Aleph on, I remember, and it might have been Jordache to you on our group chat that we have. I remember being like, I don't know about this Ape Liquid thing. Like, super community. This guy is like a tokenomics AI crypto guy. Like, I'm not really sure. And like, for those that don't know, like, I pretty much am in their space Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, almost 3 days a week. I'm in that space with them, seeing what they're developing. So I just, big shout out to, those are 3 projects that jumped out. Lazy Lions got a big shout out from Gary Vaynerchuk.
I saw that.
VFriends airdrop, and anytime, Gary is really, for Elon Musk, was like kind of the Tesla car guy. If Elon Musk said something about, electric vehicles or solar, things move.
Markets.
Gary V moves markets in this space. And he just simply said, I think I should airdrop I think I should give away a lion, V Friends 2 to a lazy lion holder. And I was like, I literally put in our group chat, was like, watch the floor go. And I mean,
Right.
it went, and like, that's kudos. We had Asher on the podcast as well. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give a couple of them because, it's easy for us to focus on the bad news and the fumbles. It's
Yep.
easy for us to avoid our bags. But I will tell you, there are some great projects. And the last thing I'll kind of let you kind of, what's your take on Yuga? We mentioned ETH. We met like the biggest player, the biggest brand, the biggest name in the space. I mean, I'm not sold on their current storytelling strategy, which has to do with like poop and swallowing keys and this like really weird component. But
Right.
they're also deploying like warm wallets and
Yep.
pushing people towards this like really innovative approach that, let's face it, if they lead the way and help the technology be implemented,
Right.
we're all going to follow suit. I don't care what you can be a Yuga hater. Just
Right.
know that if they create a warm wallet solution that allows people to mint and validate your what's in your wallet without putting your wallet at risk, we are all going to be on board. But what's your take?
100%.
I'll kind of let you kind of take that on the Yuga side, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, totally. Real quick, it's funny as you were naming out some of those projects, I'm just like playing through my head just from what I know of those projects or ones that I'm involved with. Like, what are the similarities amongst those? And they keep building. They're creating content. They're consistent with it. They're out there. They're building relationships. And I think that's something that it's easy for. I'm not gonna say it's easy. You see a lot of projects start like hunkering down and kind of like, when things aren't going the right way and they're just kind of focused on their community and all, versus like there's some things you can't stop doing. And I think, some of those projects are doing is game changing. It's just setting that foundation up for them to have that continued success no matter what the environment is around in the marketplace. So I just want to, add that. But like I said, kudos to all those you said as well, because, I'm involved in a couple of those, and, they're some of the best projects that I'm involved with. Right. And, they're delivering too. They're still delivering in this space. They're not using a bear market as an excuse. I think a lot of project, founders are saying they're using it as an excuse from, not managing their treasure correctly, or they're just, they don't have they didn't plan correctly going forward. But, people are building and creating. I think that's something that gives kudos to them. And I think it's showing up in their projects.
And I want to throw out real quick for those that are curious, all those ones we mentioned are under a 1 ETH floor.
Right.
And so the entry point is valid, right? There's Pudgy Penguins are doing some great things. Sappy Seals are doing some great things. Moonbirds crushing it. Those projects get highlighted on a lot of other shows. But to your point, like the projects that like many of us were excited 10x, 100x on early on, there's a lot less of them that are in that like tier 2 under 1 ETH that you can enter point right now. And we know like they didn't stop anything in the last 9 months. That gives you pretty damn good confidence. I just want to qualify that just because I
100%. That's a very good qualification, because we could talk about the tier 1s all day long, right? All the great, but they also have treasure chest after treasure chest after resource and big teams to do what they need to do with that. So it's good to shout out the folks that are still grinding and building in this space. But yeah, with Yuga, man, I think, I kind of see a pattern here, right? I don't know if it's a correct pattern or not, but you look at what, when they launched, Bored Apes, was that April-May timeframe when they came out with those, and then other sites came out in that April-May timeframe of last year. So I think it makes sense to anticipate something coming out around that point in time. And I think with their their storytelling, it confuses. I think the word of the day is confusion.
Yeah,
it confuses me that a company at that size that's valued at $4 billion, that raised $450 million, that has a team that big and doing like they legitimately are driving this space. They are in the driver's seat of this space. I don't know how to say, like, it gets less away from the degen and more to the mass market appeal side of things. That's like, I'm just like, when all these projects want to tout IP and, hey, look what you can do with your IP and all this other stuff, guys, these companies that are in the Web 2 space that are doing millions and billions of dollars, they're not tying their brand to a brand that has storytelling about a key going through a butthole. That's what confuses me. Like, I don't know. I don't know the direction they're going with this, with Jimmy, the monkey trial, whatever it's called. And they're coming out with Dookie Dash and sewer passes. But here's the thing. They get the benefit of the doubt. right? Like that's the thing is the company the project that side they've delivered, you know, to an extent with where they're at. They lead the market, so they have a benefit doubt. So I'm just gonna sit here and wait and see what they play out. But I'm confused to say the least on the branding around this stuff. Like I was like, because if you think about like when they came out with the other side trailer, it's like, all right, cool. Like this is like a legit trailer, dude, drinking his drink, going through the portal. You know, I'm like, cool. Like this is exciting. This is cool. What they're creating. And then when they drop the other one, I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is interesting. Like then I'm like, wait, what? Oh, did that just happen? Like, and so like it just I don't know, man. I'm not sold on it yet, but we'll see where they lead with it. But I expect they're going to be doing something fairly big in the space here in the next couple months if they follow their their current pattern of launching projects underneath their umbrella.
Yeah, one could argue that other sides gas wars kicked us into the bear market that we've been in. Maybe this next launch is the one that kicks us the other direction. And
Right.
I think a theme here from start to finish, right, is that we should all, if you're listening to this podcast, you want everything that we just talked about to win. And
Yes.
I know people that want to like bash wag me, but like the truth of the matter is there is so much space and so much for everyone to play in. I don't own anything currently in the Yuga ecosystem, and I want them to win like no other. And I will tell you, and got to give a shout out to Kevin Rose, the founder of
Yes.
Moonbirds. He put out a tweet the other day, and we need more of this in the space. And this is where we'll kind of leave you. He tweeted at the team from Yuga and said, "Hey, congrats on this movement." And it's a really, really nice tweet. We'll link it here in the show notes for everyone. And he gave them a shout out and said, from Moonbirds, big shout out to Yuga on what you guys are building and some of the innovation you guys are having, kind of wishing all the luck. And I know Gary V quote retweeted it and was like, I love seeing this. And I think we all should love seeing that. Right. And so like, I would just say for everyone that's in this space, like I want Game of Thrones to win. Like, I don't want Game of Thrones art to drop the ball, right? We want AR, VR from Apple to come into play. We want ETH. I want Solana to win. Like, I'm not like on that side. And I think here's the thing that I want to say is that there has been a couple quote unquote thought leaders in this space that have talked about people bashing them or wanting them to fail. I think those current people are stuck in a really interesting bubble that they have to get themselves out of. And so if you're in a bubble right now that is full of negativity in the Web3 space, I'm just going to recommend start unfollowing, start kind of looking for new people or new Twitter spaces, because that is like the smallest of small percentages. And we've shrunk our space so damn much. And like when I saw that tweet, it was Frank, right? So Frank from DGod tweeted that, and I don't interact with him at all, right? He doesn't know me from anyone else. But I went out of my way. I sent him a DM on Twitter. He might not have ever read it, but I was like, dude, like I hate hearing that because from the world that I'm playing in, like my timeline, and I'm pretty damn active over there on Twitter, there isn't anyone hating on them or wanting them to succeed or to fail, right? And they made some big moves, and take it or leave it. Like a lot of people that are innovating and trying things, we should celebrate all of them because that's where heavy risk. So Jordache, I love that you kind of brought that full circle too in the Yuga piece, because as much as we're confused because we're curious and we want it to win.
100%. Like, that's it, man.
If you did want it to win, it would just be ignore, right? Like it would just be like everything else that is in our world right now where we're just like, dude, I don't care about that. And they don't make any sense. But like we wanted to win. Like as soon as the trailer drops and I own nothing in their ecosystem, I'm watching that and hoping, oh my goodness, how badass is. And I remember, like you said, that other side one was so cool. Like it was like next level. And then they had the Super Bowl where Snoop Dogg and Eminem had their mutants and their apes up there. And it's weird because you would have thought A16Z and these VCs got a little bit more involved in Yuga. They would have gone the other direction.
That's the confusing part of it. It's just like they got so much, and to each their own. But you're 100% right, and I think I'm glad you pointed that out, because like some of the things that we talk about on here, things that are happening in the space, it could be representative. Like, oh, we're just talking about some of the negative things, or people are doing things wrong, or like you said, the Game of Thrones space, but. Dude, we need as many people excited about this space as possible. Like, and that's where like we have to rely on these big brands to onboard their people because they have the trust in this. And that's where I'm like, hopefully they listen to the show. They're like, man, we just want to bring it to the attention of saying, hey, you guys, we know you can do better. Like that.
Yep.
That's it. We know you can do better, and we want to support you, and we're cheering for you. But and so whether that's an NFT project, whether that's Walmart getting into the blockchain, whether that is Yuga coming out with their next evolution, we need all these successes, because all this is going to do is bring more attention to our space, and like you said, transform some of these people's thought processes of being scared or thinking this is a scam or thinking this is too confusing to now I'm curious what's going on. I keep seeing this stuff pop up. I keep hearing about this stuff. And so we need more wins. And that's where, like, it's fun to talk about the stuff of things that aren't going right. But at the same time, it's a way of saying, hey, how can we do this better for the next time? You know, that's the way I always approach these things.
Amen. And I know for some listeners out there might be living in the AI, artificial intelligence space. The people that have been all in where we are in Web3, there have been people that have been all in on AI for 10 years.
Right.
And they've just been treading water, praying that people started to come in. And there was AI tools dropping, and there was people, and and then all of a sudden, this Chat GPT drops, and all hell breaks loose. And I'm getting messages on my family group chat about Chat GPT.
Yep.
And so, like, I like connecting that dot because, like, there are, I mean, I know that I worked on the IBM Watson Alpha team in 2014, and I have friends that have literally messaged on every LinkedIn post since 2014 that they've ever posted, which they do pretty regularly, is about AI. And they've been literally talking about adoption, where it fits in our business. And wild enough, Chat GPT now unlocked, and, like, you know, my every feed on every channel right now is like 10 ways to make $1 million Chat GPT, 55
100%.
APIs.
I've already seen people dropping courses and masterminds around how to use ChatGPT and all this other stuff. But I think goes back to, like, I mean, me and you are very familiar with the adoption curve.
Yep.
Right. This is the point. This is crossing the chasm. We're starting. AI is starting to trend into that early majority phase of the adoption curve from that early adopter phase. Right. And that's really where, like, when you can get 9 million users in a 30-day period, you know you're getting you're getting closer to mass adoption, right? And so bringing this back to our space, we're going to have that chasm crossing opportunity at some point in the future. But we need to we just got to continue to work our way through this, because you're right. If you remember, you know, I was involved with some IBM Watson stuff back around that same time frame as well. And you remember with Jeopardy, when Watson beat Jeopardy, that was like the nice little PR win. Then it kind of went away. Those people didn't stop building.
Nope.
IBM didn't stop investing. Like, this stuff's been around. And so it's like, but it just takes one catalyst event, and OpenAI with their Chat GPT was that catalyst event to all of a sudden open the eyes and capture that attention at the right time, at the right moment. So that's what we like. That's when I get excited, because you don't know when it's going to be. Maybe it's Apple. Maybe not. Maybe it's when Google comes. Who knows what that catalyst event is, but all we know is we need these events to keep happening. And at some point in time, we're going to cross that chasm, and then it's game on. Then it's like, then we're going to look back, and people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe all this Web3 stuff, this metaverse stuff, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, yeah, you realize we've been doing this for a few years now. But that's part of, like, when we talk about we're still early. I feel like there's a lot of people in the Web3 space that are involved, or the NFT space that are involved, that have never really been a part of that early adopter innovator phase of a technology. And I think it's kind of new to them versus, you know, someone like you or me or whoever that been in, like, on the quote unquote bleeding edge of tech early on. This is just a pattern that it goes through, right? Like, you went through the social media one, right? When you were doing your Snapchat and all this other, or Periscope and all this other stuff. Like, how many of those companies you had to test out and fail and didn't work? Or if you remember the e-commerce boom, when people are getting scammed left and right, and people are like, I'm never going to use credit cards, blah, blah, blah. Like, now we're paying with phones and watches and things like that. So it's just that natural evolution of tech. But the cool thing about this space, I would argue this is the fastest adoption that we are seeing in technology, from a consumer technology, than we've ever seen in the history of mankind, of recorded mankind, I'll call that. And so, like, I think we're going to move faster than we think, but it's just strap in and enjoy the ride and cheer people along. And like you said, like, it's not us. There's not enough room for competition right now. Like, that's, like, let's be honest with you. There's not enough room for it. There's enough room for competition to innovate. But to grab market share and to say, this is mine, this is yours kind of thing, it's not going to work out very well for you, because that's not how you're going to win in the long run, because there's not enough consumers in this space to support that.
Amen to that. And for those that are on this space, like you're in here right now, we want you in this space. We want you to continue to be in this space, build in this space, create
Yeah.
content. So because being on this side of this massive, because like you said, we don't know when that event will happen, but it's gonna be a hell of a lot of fun to being in the know and being part of the builders when that happens versus the other side. And don't mistake it for a minute. AI is going to help jumpstart this for all of us in this space because damn, did it not just open the door for some, there's some serious money being floated around Microsoft with 10 billion,
Right.
open AI, but it also unlocked. I mean, we got, there's CGI generators. Where we're moving this, like you said, it's so fast right now, and
Yeah.
AI as well as blockchain, like the combination of those two, that along with the hardware software element of the metaverse.
Yep.
I mean, let's go, my friends.
Well,
Let's
and I'll tell you right now, like I was like, as I've been digging more into this, what is all out there in the AR sphere, right? I've been very familiar with some of the text generators, the art generators and stuff. When you start seeing AI music, I'm like, yo, I can make music. When you start looking at and going along with what you're saying, the people that are making they can make the in-game assets, the worlds for metaverse through AI, that's just gonna speed up this creation. So just like we were talking about early on, to kind of to tie a looper with this, is we were talking about cloud computing being a pillar of the Web 2 space. You best damn believe AI is going to be a pillar in this Web 3 space that we're in. Right? That's a given, right? That's one of the main pillars. And if that's the one that kicks things off, if that's the one that brought 9 million people, ChatGPT brought 9 million people, that just got them more curious around what this new technology is, what can it do? It just got them that much more curious around what else can it do, where is this going to bleed into? Pretty soon they're going to start seeing how this is bleeding into the space that we've been in for the last few years. And then, like I said, it's just more attention and more people playing the space, and it's going to be fun looking back, and it's going to be fun listening back some of these episodes that we're creating here in a couple years. Like, man, you remember when we used to talk about this, and look where we're at now, kind of thing. So,
oh yeah, that'd be fun. Thanks everybody for checking us out. Thanks for hanging with us. We really enjoy doing these episodes. Adding a little bit of a news real time updates component to the podcast. I love doing this with you, Jordache. And for
yes.
anyone that's out there, you can reach out to either one of us on Twitter or even the podcast account on Twitter. Idea, news stories, things that you would love to hear us talk about or cover. I know like our live audience, a couple of people have messaged me already. I see it here on the side, and they're like, "How is everyone not listening to this? The fact that you guys just tied ETH and Game of Thrones and Jimmy's butthole into some version of a positive Web3 space." And you can only get that here at NFT 365. So for everyone
Right.
that's listening, thanks so much for checking us out. And until next time, make it a great day, everybody. Cheers.